Welcome to the World Financial Symposium's Market Spotlight webcast series. Today's conference will start in a moment. The WFS is dedicated to educating technology leaders through webcasts like these and the Growth and Exit Strategies Conference Series held in London, New York, Silicon Valley, and other tech and financial centers around the world. The speakers and sponsors of these live events read like a who's who of industry leaders. To learn more about our live events for CEOs, owners, and investors, or to access our library of on-demand Spotlight webcasts covering markets like IT security, health tech, gaming, and more, please visit WFS.com. And now, let's join today's Market Spotlight webcast.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening to our global audiences. I am Mark O'Brien, Vice President of Mergers and Acquisitions at the Quorum Group. It is terrific to be working together with the World Financial Symposium for this Market Spotlight on marketing technology, mergers and acquisitions. Our agenda today will start with a brief introduction from me, then move to an M&A report from the Quorum research team delivered by my colleague, Timothy Goddard. We'll follow that with what promises to be an excellent panel and closing comments before finishing with a Q&A. At Quorum, we track disruptive trends in the industry with a particular focus on what is driving M&A for our clients. There has been and continues to be disruptive innovation driving the entire marketing tech sector. These disruptive innovations are directly driving M&A activity. The ultimate benefit of this is multifaceted. The founders and shareholders are positively affected, but so are the customers who are making huge jumps in marketing results and optimized execution. This hunger is fueling vendors' M&A activity. Quorum, as you may know, has sold more software companies than anyone in the world. That experience translates to a vast reservoir of M&A metrics, trends, and actionable activity for Quorum to tap into. Here are some of the Quorum client deals from the marketing technology ecosystem. Here I will call out just a couple to bear in mind, but Tim will give a longer overview in a few minutes. Interactions acquired our client Digital Roots back in May to add AI-based social media engagement to their omnichannel virtual assistant solutions. And Chegg acquired our client Campus Special to extend their mobile advertising platform, a good example of the need to dip into the acquisition market to address revenue opportunities, in this case, to target college students. Today we will be marshaling the Quorum Group's research team to deliver an overview of the valuations and deal flow with some actionable insights for our audience. Then we will pivot to a panel and look into their educated crystal ball at M&A trends. I will be joined shortly by Peter Coffey, Vice President of Strategic Research at Salesforce, and Roz Lemieux, whose company Attentively was acquired by Blackbaud, and she now heads up Blackbaud Labs. It is sure to be an insightful panel. I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce my colleague at Quorum and our Executive Vice President of Marketing, Timothy Goddard. He has the unique perspective of both being a consumer of the innovative new technologies in his position, but also a key member of the Quorum team at the forefront of the M&A marketplace. I'm very pleased he's able to join me today. I'll now pass it over to Tim to walk us through the trends and research we are seeing in the Martech space.
Thanks, Mark. As Mark mentioned, I am usually on the marketing end of these sorts of events, but given the subject matter, I really enjoyed working with our research team here at Quorum and digging into the detailed analysis that I am very pleased to bring you today. So let's start with a broad look at the landscape. Many of you have probably seen this chart. It's been making the rounds since it was created in May. From an M&A perspective, it is a little misleading because this is looking at any of the tools that you might use in marketing rather than at the Martech firms in particular. If you look closely, lots of companies are listed multiple times, and that is often a consequence of previous M&A. So let's take a look at that M&A. Here's sort of the equivalent chart from 2010. And then here is the consolidation that has happened since then. In red, you've got strategic acquisitions, and in blue are acquisitions by private equity firms. We'll come back to those private equity acquisitions because they really are playing an increasing role. So what we're seeing here is a piece of a new Martech model that's emerging, and this is playing a role in that. Some are calling it the platformization of the industry. This is sort of the middle ground between the two models being floated about 10 years ago or so, when your two sort of potential paradigms were the multiple point solutions versus the single provider. But in the platform model, it's really a combination of those two, where you've got the major sort of sole source-ish providers like Salesforce, Adobe, Eloqua, others, in combination with each other and then supplemented with a large number of interoperable point solutions. This is a stack from Cisco that just kind of gives one example of what that can look like for a large company. So this model, this interoperable model, is making that slide of the 5,000 different tools possible. And at least initially, that's great news for Martech entrepreneurs. But there's a downside to it, especially if you are considering M&A. That interoperability that everybody is really seeking in the industry makes it a lot easier for a large company to use your company to achieve their business goals without actually having to make an acquisition. In our business, we call that getting the milk without buying the cow. So one of the questions that you need to be thinking about if you're considering M&A in this space is, what are you going to bring to a potential acquirer that they can't get just by throwing together some APIs and saying, have at it? Okay? So that's something we're going to look at closely in this report and then in the conversation with our panel as well. So that particular angle is one aspect that's having an impact here, where we are seeing an overall decline in M&A volume in the space. That's tracking the broader tech M&A market, where we've got a lot of different sort of supply-side trends squeezing the market, while demand and valuations are still remaining high. But you saw on that first slide, there's a good amount of supply, at least at a certain level, so that's not the whole picture in the Martech space, and there really are some specific things going on here. We did have a spike in total deals in 2015, followed by a number of mega deals in 2016, which is kind of a classic consolidation wave. So one of the reactions you're seeing in the market as a whole, but I think particular for Martech, is some digesting and retrenchment after that flurry of activity. So these mega deals do give an indication, at least, of what kind of high valuations are possible in this space, both from strategic buyers as well as private equity firms. And then looking at the top buyers over the last 3 years, you can see even more clearly that private equity firms are dominating. Vista, in particular, has been not just doing big deals, but been doing lots of deals. Now, that interoperable environment that I described, where strategic Martech firms kind of hold off on acquisition, that is actually a great environment for private equity. And so you can see that here, because it lets them grab the smaller successful firms or, of course, in the larger ones as well. And because the PEs do have such a large amount of cash to spend, they are looking for those larger deals that sort of move the needle. You do also have other names on here that you might not necessarily expect. J2, they're a traditionally acquisitive company doing a roll-up of email marketing firms. They're particularly focused on the SMB space, and that did include our client, Email Direct. eBay is a great example of a company that's facilitating a very specific kind of marketing, and we'll come back to that kind of thing. In this case, obviously, that's e-commerce, and they're using Martech acquisitions to bolster what they can offer within that sector. So again, especially if you don't have the kind of scale that you need to serve as a platform company for private equity, and that, as a rough number, it varies from place to place, but as a rough number, you can consider sort of $15 million in annual SaaS revenue as a relatively decent floor for that. You really do need to differentiate your company, not just your product, as you look ahead. So we're going to look at some ways that firms have done that and sold. One way is by focusing on disruptive trends, building out those tools, channels, and business models that buyers are going to want and need to have in-house before somebody else gets them. We track these trends pretty carefully here at Quorum. This is our 2017 set. We will be unveiling our new trends for 2018 at our annual report on January 18th, and I hope you can join us for that. But I can tell you, AI enablement will remain at the top of the list. And we're certainly seeing Martech deals along that theme, even for small companies. In July, for example, HubSpot acquired Tembi, just a two-person team, for AI-enabled customer data analysis. And Forum Clients, Digital Roots that Mark mentioned, was acquired by Interactions for AI-enabled social media engagement tools. Now, you can go down that whole list of trends, and there really is a marketing angle to all of them, and one or more of those may be an opportunity for your company to exploit, both in the market and as you look towards M&A. Now, another angle, of course, is to focus on vertical markets. This takes particular discipline. Marketing is really a very horizontal kind of market and kind of endeavor. But for smaller companies in particular, the value of the domain expertise and targeted solutions that you can build with that kind of focus can prove very valuable, as we see here. Referral Solution Group focused very narrowly on rehab centers. They got picked up for 4.5 times revenue by American Addiction Centers this year. And then in the auto sector, there have been a dozen focused Martech deals since 2015, That was capped off in September by Automotive Mastermind, being acquired by IHS Markit for nearly $400 million after doing $23 million in 2016. There are other ways to focus other than just mega trends or sectors. Placed, for example, focused on location-based customer profiling and retargeting. They found a buyer in Snap, who's desperately trying to live up to its lofty public valuation. This is very similar to something we saw Twitter do a couple years ago when they spent $500 million on customer profiling and retargeting outfit Telepart. You have the kind of tools that these newly public companies in particular need in order to justify themselves to shareholders. Good place to be. Our final deal profile before the panel, let's look at another private equity acquisition. ClickDimensions is a marketing automation tool for Microsoft Dynamics CRM. It's actually a tool that I use personally, and that was acquired by top-tier PE Excel KKR in 2016. Again, even though they're doing very general marketing automation, that focus on a particular platform in this case really helped make them both a successful company and then an attractive acquisition target. Now, let's talk valuation. Having looked at some deals, we saw some very high multiples in some of them, but let's get to some broad numbers. In the public markets, we saw very high multiples, particularly before some of the mega deals like Marketo took high-growth companies off of the market. So there was, between that and just in general the consolidation, a drop in sales and EBITDA ratios as that consolidation happened. But we're beginning to see an uptick again. That's very clear, particularly in EBITDA. And that increase in the EBITDA number really does bring home the fact that this market, at least as it stands now with the current technology landscape, it's really starting to mature, which highlights the value of a strong focus as you look forward to how you want to build out your company going forward. So M&A multiples, as opposed to the public multiples we just looked at, they've also been very healthy. We kind of have a bimodal distribution here, which is interesting. If you take a very broad, high-level view of the general themes we see here, obviously service-heavy companies, older technology, a lot of what might cross more into the ad tech realm, those tend to see lower multiples. Email marketing, somewhat there in the middle, it's pretty consolidated. Marketing automation is heading in that direction. Predictive analytics are understandably very strong. And then another thing that I thought was noticeable as we looked at the deals here, Martech firms that have some kind of interaction with payments and transactions directly, they tend to do well. Kind of value placed on that digital currency flow, that is another one of our disruptive trends we really thought play out in these numbers here. Now with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Mark, who's going to introduce our panel.
I am thrilled to have an impressive panel of industry leaders. We will be joined today on the panel by Peter Coffey and Roz Lemieux. Welcome, Peter and Rosalind.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Peter is Vice President of Strategic Research at Salesforce. They've been very active in the M&A marketplace, particularly last year with a $2.8 billion acquisition of Demandware and a bundle of other companies. Rosalind was CEO-founder of Attentively, acquired last year by Blackbaud for their marketing tech focus. Blackbaud is publicly traded, and Roz now runs Blackbaud Labs. It will be interesting to get both horizontal and vertical corporate acquisition perspectives. Horizontally from Peter with Salesforce, as they have built out an impressive acquisition strategy, and Roz with vertical acquisition imperatives driving M&A, which she has seen firsthand. Welcome, and thank you both for joining me today. I'd like to start with a general or high-level perspective from the panel. As mentioned before, the marketing tech market is growing rapidly in size and reach of new applications being introduced. It is impressive and disruptive, thus a very attractive area in the M&A market. My first question to the panel. The space is maturing, and we are seeing marketing platforms become comprehensive. What are the innovations you are seeing actually make significant impact at the customer level? Is it artificial intelligence, AI, personalization, optimization, predictive analytics, or something else? Peter, do you want to take the first crack at this?
My pleasure. Thank you. I've been talking with developers and IT people about this idea of platforms for going on 30 years now, and what I've seen in maybe the last 6 or 7 years is a significant pivot in the way that word is used. Platform used to be a bundle of technology as defined by a vendor. So, for example, you might have a platform that begins with a server, operating system, database engine, middleware stack, and some applications, and that would be the blank platform. A developer would say, well, I'm a blank developer. What we're seeing now is the notion that platform is defined as a layer of abstraction above which you're going to innovate and differentiate, and below which you're really looking for interoperable, standards-based services that you can orchestrate at an API level. And what that means is that acquisition now really needs to be viewed through a lens not of what new capability do I need, but what advantage will I get by bringing a team in-house and doing a platform that benefits from awareness at something more closely coupled than an API. So, for example, not merely having an AI product which you could interoperate with, but taking your AI team and having them infuse prediction and cognitive types of processing across the entire portfolio of services, which is the strategy we've taken at Salesforce. So, for example, the Einstein brand describes that layering of an AI capability throughout everything we do, as opposed to some new pillar of the castle that represents an AI product. We don't create new products. In fact, the language they use over at Amazon when they talk about adding skills to the Echo product and the Alexa family of services, they don't talk about them as apps. They talk about them as skills. When you add a new skill, it complements the others. And that platform way of thinking is really important. That's one of the two ways that I see the word changing. When you talk about a marketing platform, I think the most important thing that you're seeing now, and that is embodied in the way we've been looking at acquisitions at Salesforce over the last few years, is that doing a better job of selling things to the customer who's already aware of being a customer, who's already walked into your store, and then sort of putting that relationship on suspended animation when they leave the store and then renewing it when they come back in, that is no longer exciting to anybody. The moment of potential customer acquisition now doesn't begin with you knowing that someone even exists. The minute a cell phone comes out of the box and begins to browse on the web, it's never logged into anything. And yet we can begin to identify patterns of interest, patterns of activity associated with the device. And then eventually, if the owner of that device becomes identifiable by making a purchase, well, now retroactively, everything you know about that credit card account holder, about everything else you know they've done, well, now that can be post facto put back together into a really comprehensive profile of activities and interests. So marketing platforms now are growing in two different ways. One, by emphasizing interoperability of services that creates capability across the portfolio of what used to be thought of as separate applications. And now I kind of like the Alexa metaphor of these are skills that you have. And two, really dramatically expanding the envelope of activity within which you view someone as a prospect. You do not wait for them to identify to you as a prospect. You go out there and you start looking at the dark matter of the universe that does not shine with its own light, but there are still signatures of activity and interest that can be identified and that can be used to develop a relationship.
That is great insight. Thank you. Rosalind, can you jump in and give your perspective?
Yeah, sure. To your point, Mark, about the vertical and the horizontal perspective, all of that is, I think, great horizontal view of, where things are headed. And I'm coming from a different little history, right, which is my company that was acquired by Blackbaud, and now Blackbaud is very focused on a particular market, which is we call the philanthropic space. So that includes nonprofits, hospitals, higher ed, the whole sort of social good economy. So it's interesting to take these big trends and kind of boil down to, okay, what actually matters for a particular market or particular segment of customers. And that kind of immediately takes me away from the sort of technical dimensions of a marketing platform to what's actually working. So something that is kind of a big trend in our space as it relates to cause marketing is sort of the resurgence of influencer engagement, and particularly micro-influencers, which takes different shapes on the technology side. But the big trend for us is the maturation of peer-to-peer engagement into kind of the systematic ways of ensuring that you're finding the individuals who are most engaged with your issue, your cause, your organization, and empowering them to be ambassadors. So, when I look across the technologies that are available, there are exceptions. There are very large, very well-resourced nonprofits. There's about 1.5 million nonprofits in the U.S. They generate about $2 trillion a year in revenue, so it's a relatively large market. Most of them don't have huge ad budgets. They don't have huge digital teams. So they are, for the most part, doing still flavors of kind of direct cause marketing, sending email, direct mail, social events. They're using some of these technologies for personalization, targeting, et cetera. But all of those sort of one-to-many communications have felt a squeeze over the last 5 years that boil down to, I think, people don't particularly like to hear from institutions. And I think there's something intuitive about that. Institutions can't talk. So, there's something inherently disingenuous about it. People kind of caught on to it. They want to hear from other human beings. And I think marketing technology has invented a lot of answers to that, ways to emulate human touch. And that's personalization, AI, micro-targeting. End of the day, a lot of that stuff either remains out of reach of nonprofits or really in a space where people don't mind talking about it, because people don't mind talking about causes. We believe that that's way, especially if your cause is to have, legions of real people saying positive things about your brand, being ambassadors, making the ask, doing work on your behalf. So that's where influencer marketing and micro-influencers in particular has become kind of a growth area for us. Blackbaud, which is the largest cloud software provider in the social good space globally, has invested very heavily from the acquisition of my company, Timely, last year in 2016 to the much larger recent acquisition of Just Giving, Everyday Hero prior to that. We really think that, a marketing platform sort of generic term, for us, it's putting together the whole B2B2C experience. It's creating compelling consumer experiences that then feed into those marketing platforms for the nonprofits that we serve is where the real future is. So it sounds different if you describe it from different angles, but at the end of the day, it's not so much about an individual technology. It's about keeping it really simple for the organization and creating tools for those, what you consider consumer in any other industry, but our donors, supporters, volunteers in our industry to be able to support their work.
No, that was very insightful from both of you. And again, I think it is very interesting to get both the horizontal and vertical perspectives on that. So thank you very much. Let's pivot into the ecosystem. Peter, as you interact with your customers, and Roz, with your Blackbaud Labs role, each of you have very strong technology backgrounds. Are there additional technologies and next generation innovation that you are seeing requested or envisioned? Roz, why don't you take the lead here?
To dovetail with the last answer, honestly, the most interesting thing to me, and I think that we're really working on cracking right now at Blackbaud, is how to push as many tools, communication tools, organizing tools, sort of peer-to-peer organizing tools, peer-to-peer cause marketing tools down to the individual level to those passionate ambassadors as possible. That's not necessarily the most cutting-edge technology, but it is a very tricky thing to pull off and manage risk at the same time. So I'll put that in a bucket of, from the vertical view, right, that it's a super interesting area of work that is very innovative, that isn't necessarily using any Star Trek level technologies. In terms of actual sort of new technology that's interesting, a few things that are maybe our top three. IoT in the field to monitor outcomes is a big deal for us. Blackbaud really encompasses the social good ecosystem in a way that I don't think a lot of others in our market do. We have products that donors primarily engage with that are really individual level. We have fundraising products that are nonprofit used. We have grant management products. So we sort of connect all these pieces of the ecosystem, but there's still a way to go, I think, in tracking outcomes from, hey, I really want to improve people's access to water. I'm going to give to this organization. I'm going to, give this money to the grant-making organization and track it down to the nonprofit and down to, the water system in the field. So IoT in the field for tracking outcomes is an interesting one for us. Voice skills at home, just kind of removing the barriers to people giving, engaging, when it's on their mind. as one of the sort of potential uses of that. And then blockchain for transparency, and again, tracking outcomes sort of through that whole ecosystem from I, the donor, want to see this impact in the world to, I have a transparent, guaranteed, verified view into what happens to that dollar all the way down to the impact it had on the ground.
Excellent. Peter, what are your thoughts here?
I think probably the single most important thing to appreciate is that there must be a complete elimination of any sensation of separate channels, dividing up a customer's experience into an email channel and a web channel and a phone channel. Every time I interact with a brand, every interaction I've had across all of what we used to call channels needs to be part of their understanding of me as a customer, and they need to be communicating back with me in time, context, location, appropriate ways. It's really difficult to do this. It's really difficult to see the future as something more than a stainless steel and neon version of the present that you understand. Interesting, Roz just used the expression Star Trek technologies. In the reboot movie in 2009, supposedly set several hundred years from now, Starfleet cadets are clustered around someone reading them their ship assignments from a clipboard. It's an illuminated clipboard, but they're not just glancing at their wrists to find out what ship they're supposed to report to, because after all, in 2009, the Apple Watch was still 6 years away. So actually trying to understand what things are going to look like, 6 to 10 years from now, this continues to defy us. We still want to see plugging the technology into the familiar habits and activities instead of understanding how habits and activities are going to be transformed. It was Angela Arendt, either when she was still at Burberry or just after she'd moved to Apple, who said, at some point, saying omni-channel marketing just starts to sound stupid, because if it's not omni-channel, it's not marketing anymore.
Right.
And all of your investments now need to be targeted at the idea of, I'm designing an experience. I'm not designing an interaction. I'm designing an experience, and then asking what aspects of that experience are best delivered on a wearable, on an in-car device, through roadside advertising. General Motors owns the patent on having roadside ads dynamically change their displays based on the destinations programmed into the nav systems of passing cars. They've had that patent for decades. It might surprise people to realize that General Motors understands its product long ago stopped being merely the automobile and became instead the transportation experience, which happens to include for many people owning and driving a car. But that's not the future. The experience design, rather than message delivery, has to be the lens through which all of this is seen.
No, that's excellent, Peter. Really, that was kind of a crystal ball question, but it was interesting because we cover and track disruptive trends, and Roz hit on IoT and AI enablement and blockchain with digital currency flow, and you hit on omnichannel and connected health, and you guys are completely on the money with that. And it's interesting because I saw a quote the other day that in the past, when people wanted to see the future of the auto industry, they went to auto shows. If they want to see the future of the auto industry now, they go through the patent office and take a look at what the latest patent applications are. But moving on to our last panel question, guys, really great feedback there. Let's focus specifically on the M&A environment. Given all that we've discussed, and what are the lessons you think the CEOs on the call today need to take away as they look ahead to questions of growth and potential exit? And I guess a secondary part of that would be, what are the implications of all this for M&A? Peter, you see a lot in your role. What are your thoughts there?
The most powerful trends I'm seeing today are the brands that understand that their value proposition is not what they used to think was the product they sold, but is the piece of their customer's life or the organization to which they're selling's life that they're supporting. So, for example, we've got a customer, Argent, making women's apparel, whose stores, because they're catering to working women, also include the ability to book a meeting room or to have a quiet place where you can take a conference call while they're working on your clothing. They understand that if they want to engage you for a piece of time that gets you into the storefront, maximizing the value of that time is really important. And so the brand is more than the clothing you're there to buy. It's the experience they're crafting around that. Now, what does that imply for M&A? Well, I had a conversation with someone in agribusiness once who said, how does any of this apply to me? My product is fertilizer. My answer was, your product isn't fertilizer. Your product is profit per acre. And your brand represents an opportunity to sell micro-targeted weather forecasting services, soil chemistry services, any number of things that might be done either by an acquisition or by a partner operating under your label. But the important thing is that your brand starts to have a larger and larger umbrella across the goal the customer had in engaging with you, not the product that your goal is to sell to that customer. So from an M&A point of view, my comment would be, look at the moments of time and space in which you want your customer to be engaged with you. Ask what would make those things more valuable. And if you don't have a competency in bring people in who will do that. For example, Henrik Fisker of the electric car space has people working in his interior design whose past background is with Disney, because they're understanding the interior of a car is no longer just the necessary cabin for operating the machine. It's a space in which you spend a lot of your life, and they want to make it entertaining, interesting, and productive. And the pivot that represents in terms of what kinds of companies will I buy, what kinds of people will I want to acqui-hire, what are my objectives in an M&A activity, I think are a huge pivot from what we used to be talking about even as recently as 10 years ago.
I do completely agree with you, Peter, and you're in such a great position on the strategy side to look at that. It's a fascinating time to be there. So, Rosalind, on your side, you've been the founder and CEO, and you've got that perspective, having that successful exit. So, on the CEO side, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, sure. I'll speak to I guess the first time through CEOs. If the exit is what you're looking for at the end, I think you need, just as you look at your product from the user perspective, you should look at your company from the buyer perspective. I think that's something a lot of startup folks miss. They think if I make an amazing product or something that's using some cutting edge technology, then my exit will find me. But for me, in the rearview mirror, as a founder, I really didn't have the sort of flavors of M&A clear in my mind. The reasons why companies buy other companies. Sometimes it's to acquire specific technology, some super new technology where you've got unique expertise. Other times you've just used the technology in just the right way for a particular market, which was ours. And your buyer is a company that's just sort of these larger enterprise companies. You can acquire you sort of quicker and more efficient, right? So there's this sort of tech exit. Sometimes companies are buying for revenue to pick up your growth and your margins and your dollars. And so, that's sort of obvious, but sometimes they want to hire for talent. And I think as a CEO, having an pretty clear idea of what the positive outcomes are that you would be happy with, and then kind of looking at what do you know about the potential buyers. You're not going to guess all of them, but a lot of times, especially if you develop something for a very particular customer, it's not a leap of imagination to figure out which companies might want to acquire your firm. And then, attending, honestly, I went to one of the Quorum panels, and I went to a couple of other things when we started to think about selling our company, and it was a little bit eye-opening for me to start thinking about our business as a collection of assets, the technology, the people, the customer list, the growth, the revenue, and think about the different reasons why particular companies would want to acquire us. So that's, I'm sure, super obvious to anyone who's working in the M&A space, or doing strategy regularly, but I don't think it's super obvious to most founders, first-time folks who haven't been through an exit before. In some ways, people can tell you this 100 times. You don't really learn it until you go through it.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you, and that's one of the reasons this last question and your answers are spot on, because those are some key takeaways for sure, and it does have implications in regards to the M&A activity they'll be doing. We're kind of hitting a bit of a hard stop here. on timing, but I really wanted to thank both of you. Your insight and perspective was outstanding, and the audience is really benefiting from this. So thank you, Peter, and thank you, Roz. Really appreciate it.
Completely a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, that contains a lot to digest. We will have a recorded copy of this webinar. If you want to go back and touch on different areas, we can send you the link to that. As we are nearing kind of the home stretch here, I wanted to wrap this together with some marketing tech M&A focus. As you can see, there's some key takeaway lessons that we can delve into, like leveraging disruptive trends to differentiate in a crowded, consolidated market. Really, the alignment in a consolidating market are particularly suited for CEOs to look how to leverage the disruptive trends. And then finding ways to build value for acquirers that go beyond interoperability. It's an important point in an API world we live in today with interoperability that you can create value drivers above and beyond the integration. And then recognizing omni-channel marketing is no longer a trend, it's reality. Peter really nailed it in the panel when he noted that omni-channel marketing is marketing, or you're viewing your initiatives pretty myopically if you're not considering that. And then consider a vertical focus. This should be a consideration for a few reasons. In a market that is crowded and consolidating, there is a positioning benefit for you. The other came in the valuation overview with Tim, where you saw valuation premiums with a vertical focus. And then lastly, look at your company from a buyer's perspective. I want to address this a little bit more, but in a nutshell, it's an important element for improving or validating your strategy, your tactics, and potential corporate focus. You can submit questions. We're going to get to them in the Q&A in a minute here. But I will close with these thoughts. The research report was insightful, and it was an impressive panel. I have had interaction with the panelists in the past and have been impressed with the astute market perspective they have. Tim and the research group at Quorum highlighted this earlier, but there are significant opportunities for M&A if positioned properly as companies fortify their offerings with innovative companies. I did find it interesting, again, that Roz touched on viewing your company from the acquirer perspective. She had attended a Quorum M&A workshop, and it obviously paid off for her, both in perspective and the ultimate acquisition of Attentively. It's really a helpful perspective to view from. And why do companies look to acquire, and why the disruptive trends in marketing tech will continue to drive acquisitions? It is actually a very strong driver, as disruptive trends do create change. That change drives strategic imperative, and those strategic imperatives then drive acquisitions. It's really one of the key takeaways today is looking to align with these trends. I want to again thank Peter and Rosalind for their participation, Tim and the Quorum research team, along with our partners at the World Financial Symposium for an excellent market spotlight. Let's move to Q&A. You can submit questions. If we don't get to your questions, we can certainly respond later to that. And I see one that just came in, and Tim, you can weigh in at any point if you'd like as well. But the question was, with deal count down, is it still time to go to market? And that's a very good question, and it's a question that we at Quorum, we track the M&A activity, and we've got graphs that show the steep climbs and then the drop-offs. It is a good time to still go out. There's bright spots there, and there's really three things that are driving continued M&A activity, and that is the disruptive trends. And again, they're really active right now. The other is strong public markets, and the third is really cash available. We are seeing about $3 trillion in the private equity market, and strategics with another $1 trillion. So there's a lot of money out there to be spent, and that will continue to drive M&A as we go forward.
And Mark, if I can jump in, one of the key aspects of that money is a lot of it is with the private equity firms who, unlike a strategic company that sort of can sit on it, the private equity firms have to put that money to use. And so we're seeing a lot of deals done not just by companies themselves, but their portfolio companies. And that just has to continue. They have to keep doing that. Now, they are, generally looking for at the platform level for companies of a scale, but on the portfolio side, they can go a lot smaller and go a lot more strategic and behave a lot more like a strategic company. So that's going to drive things significantly in the year to come. And speaking of which, we are holding our annual report on January 18, which I mentioned before. We'll go into a lot more details about these sort of value drivers and why, even with a slight dip here, that dip has more to do, broadly speaking, with the supply of companies of a particular scale than it does about sort of the demand. Because the demand is definitely there. We see that every day here at Quorum. We have a record number of companies under LOI right now, and looking forward to sharing announcements going forward. But there's a lot happening.
And I guess the last question we'll take here, I got a question. You have mentioned disruptive trends, and we've noted some of these. Which disruptive trends, just to summarize, were mentioned in this webinar? And again, we can get you a copy of this, but I had not jotted down AI enablement, Internet of Things, software, digital currency flow with Roz mentioning blockchain, omnichannel sales, and data science monetization. So that is 5 of the 10 that we have tracked in 2017, so a very robust area. And with that, I wanted to thank everyone and hope you have a good day. If you have further questions, please let us know.
We hope you enjoyed today's online symposium. If you have any questions not answered, please submit them to info@wfs.com. We look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming live events in a city near you. To register for these live events, view upcoming webcast topics, or hear rebroadcast of this or other Market Spotlight events, please go to wfs.com. Thank you for attending today's webcast.